Her story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil rock.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
You're listening to the Riff Worship podcast, a podcast that attempts to answer the age-old question, what makes a riff? Why do we care about the riff? Talking about albums concerning riffs, sometimes talking to people who may write or like a good riff. I'm one of your hosts, Austin Paulson. With me, as always, is the great Bald Hope, the great Baldini, Dylan Adams. How's it going, buddy?
It's good, man. How are you?
Oh, great. We're down a guest this week. The old man's out in Atlanta.
Good. Put him down.
But
we
have a guest with us today, a very special guest that is probably just as accomplished as Swindle. Our guest today is a musician, an author, a label owner. You might know him from some groups such as the Locust, Retox, Head Wound City, Some Girls, Holy Molar. His band Planet B released a sophomore album, Fiction Prediction, that is out now through 31G, as well as a split with Nate No Face. Def Club released a split EP in collaboration with the Hearst Collective, as well as Fuck Money. He is the subject of the documentary Don't Fall in Love with Yourself that was released a couple years by Turnstile Films, and one half of the Planet B podcast, Cult and Culture. I am, of course, talking about Justin Pearson. Justin, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Thank you for all of that. Usually people are like, oh, he's in this band and that's it. So thank you very much.
You're a very, very busy person. And I'm glad that I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk with us today about a very wild record.
Well, I appreciate people taking the time to want to talk to me because there's a lot of stuff out there. There's 200,000 plus new songs released today. So I appreciate when someone cares.
Well, in the back of my head, the initial kind of point of me reaching out to you, was very funny to me. Like I had initially reached out to you in an email, maybe to possibly discuss Kiss, which, after following you for like several years, I know you had like somewhat of a relationship with in your youth, as I did as well. And then hilariously, just like, this is the worst band I've ever heard. They're terrible. I'd talk about anything else. But yes, we found a good talking point today, I think.
All right.
You were like vaguely a fan. Like, I mean, you were a fan in your youth. It kind of like struck you with like maybe some of the imagery, I'm assuming.
Obsessed when I was a little kid. When I was 5, actually, I was supposed to go see him play. And the plan was me and my friend Ryan and his older brother Justin were going to go. And I don't remember what happened. I remember like, being 5, I don't think of all the logistics. So at some point I was sitting in the back of the car with just Ryan and we like my mom bought us a bunch of Pez and then like was taking us home. And I was like, hey, what's up with Kiss? And she's like, oh, we decided you guys are too young. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? I didn't say that, but I thought it. And so Justin, who was a little bit older, got to go with his dad. And I was like, dude, I need to like go see that. But then like a couple years later, I heard the song Beth on the radio, and that's Peter Criss's like solo thing. And it was so funny. I was on a vacation. It was playing in the car, and the imagery is so wild to me. So I was in this place called Flagstaff, and it was snowing, and my dog took a shit in the back of our Blazer that we had, and it was like steaming. So there was like this steaming shit happening, and I was like, what the fuck is this song? And they're like, that was the new Kiss single, Beth. And I was just like, oh. And so then I kind of was like, hey, maybe this band's not that good. And it was around then that like I started like kind of realizing that there was way cooler shit, specifically like Van Halen and I don't know, all kinds of stuff, but like Twisted Sister, whatever. Like, so I started getting into like all other kinds of music, and that was it. Yeah. So but so it was the imagery. I mean, they made all this shit for kids, and so I was like, cool, and they looked cool to me at the time. Yeah.
Well, and kind of pointing to the Def Club EP, where you kind of used Gene, his imagery. What's the source of that? Are you like maybe tapping into some of that from your youth, or are you just kind of like maybe some of the lyrical themes on the EP as well, or?
I mean, definitely not lyrical themes, but I figured like there's a lot to it. So like Def Club's an interesting thing because some people are upset at us as a band. They call us ableist because we're not technically deaf, and they're like saying that we're like fucked up for calling our band that, and that's fine. But I thought like since it's like the pinnacle of like rock music, I mean Gene Simmons is like kind of the guy, like the image of him, and so I thought like oh, it'd be funny to use that. But I saw this flyer at a show and it had Ace Frehley on it. He's a local musician in San Diego who was in Kiss. I mean, he's locally in San Diego or whatever, from Kiss. And it was a photo, it was a drawing of him, and he like had a robe on and it's like no clothes underneath it, and it's like huge dick. And I was like, oh, that's really funny looking. What if we put Gene on our cover with a tiny dick? And then kind of went from there. But like, Ace Frehley seems cool. Like everyone seems like pretty decent. I mean, Paul Stanley said some really stupid shit. I think he's in The Decline of the Western Civilization Part 2, talking about how the guitar is like an extension of your penis. And I think that's pretty fucking dumb. And so then, but Gene has said a lot of dumb shit. So I was like, let's just fuck with him and put a tiny dick on there and then see what happens. I thought it would like result in a lawsuit or something cool like that, but nothing's happened yet. So
Yeah. There's always a possibility with those guys, I guess.
Yeah. And we collaborated with one of my favorite artists, Paul Rentler. So shout out to him. That dude, everything that guy makes is so sick. So he was psyched because I was like, hey, I want to do a record cover with Gene Simmons nude with a tiny dick and like a football team of zombies behind him. And he's like, oh yeah, that sounds fantastic. And then just like knocked it out,
Well, the topic of discussion today, definitely maybe influenced the title of that EP, Bad Songs Forever. You've kind of paid tribute to this band over the years as well in different iterations. But, tell me about the Cramps. I feel like maybe doing some research and talking with you a little bit over email, this is a pretty pivotal band for you and your musical journey in general.
Yeah, so I mean, I was already on this on the weird music trajectory. I think like discovering bands like Sig Sputnik, who were in the Ferris Bueller's Day Off movie, was like really kind of a big shift, and then getting like into thrasher, skate rock and stuff. But it was really when I was 12. I'd already loved the Cramps for whatever reasons, but going and seeing them play when I was 12 and meeting them was the thing that kind of really fucked me up in a great way. And it's weird because I don't really know how I felt at the time. I just remember I was in this theater and I was next to the PA, like the wall of PA speakers, not knowing any better, and with no ear protection, just like watching the entire set. And I know now, I don't really like dance or anything, so I was just like fully observing it. It was like I have to like study this thing. And at the time I didn't know. I was just mesmerized, And so I was like just watching the band, and it was when they had a really interesting lineup. It was with this bass player named Candy Del Mar, and so it was just really cool to have these two women on the string instruments featured, and then obviously Lux and like as attire and with the microphone in his pants and stuff. And I was like, oh, this is pretty wild. And then I ended up meeting them, and that was kind of like a big deal because I had assumed everybody was sort of like Gene Simmons, that like in a band. I was just like, I didn't really know anybody. I never met anyone. So I just kind of assumed they'd be a shithead. And then they were the nicest people to me and really changed everything. And over the years, I ended up like meeting them a few times and kind of talking about it a few times, which was great too, and also interesting. But I also have come pretty close to meeting Kiss, and it was just dismal garbage. But they're like the complete opposites, which you would expect, I think.
Did you do like a meet and greet type of thing with Kiss or something?
A friend of mine like gave us a pass to go do one of those things, and it was like pretty wild. And this was not that long ago, which is funny because it took quite a while for me to see them play.
Yeah.
I just assumed I would have seen them at an earlier age, but and the only original members was Gene and Paul, which was kind of a bummer because I thought like it sucked without Ace, and I the drummer situation was wild too because for one, that guy's tiny. The one they have now, he is like really really small, and and then in his Kiss outfit, he looks like a fucking Ewok or something. It's so weird. So it was crazy to like see that. He's very short, and uh there was the meet and greet. I was like, cool, like we're gonna be able to meet them. But there was this plexiglass thing between us, and it was just so stupid. And like you just stand there, and there's like a glare from the photo and shit. It just looks like garbage. Kind of like the most of their shit they put out, like the fucking pinball machine and the color form thing and like coloring books or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, that's the only iteration, as a person who got into them way after their anything like peak. They had the members that they currently have, like, and then coming to terms with like, oh, this is like it's the same thing every night. I'm sure it's like dubbed over or whatever. Yeah. And so, but I was really excited when you brought the opportunity, like, okay, we'll get into the Cramps, because I'm sure I could speak for Dylan. I don't think this is really a band that either of us had a lot of history with. Like the imagery speaks for itself. Certainly heard some songs, but I was excited just to kind of like, okay, this is not a band I'm familiar with, diving full, steam ahead into the history. And what a fucking story this band has. And like, and a lot of correlations, like I noticed maybe between your journey through music and their own. It's so cool. And what a very interesting choice for a record as well. Bad Music for Bad People from 1984, because it's not a studio album. It's a compilation, correct?
Yeah, but I mean, at the time, when I think I was like 10 when I got that record, it was just like on cassette, like that was, and it just looked cool. It was like the cover. It just seemed like an LP to me, because I don't think, maybe I should have like done a little bit of research, but I think it was like the first like kind of like it was on IRS. So I don't know if it was like a major label, but it was the first label or the first record of theirs that was like widely distributed. So you could go into the mall, which is the only place I had access to, and look at the cassette wall and be like, oh, there's this. I mean, they also had Misfits, Earth AD, and Legacy of Brutality, but then they didn't have all like the weirdo Misfits shit. So like, I think it was just the only Cramps tape you could get at the time. And it was everything, it made such a huge impact on me. And then somehow in context to that, I discovered this thing called Target Video, which was like a company that did all these videos, and they put out the Cramps at the mental hospital, the Napa. And that was so crazy for me to watch. And I also didn't really understand the validity of what like they were doing. I just thought, oh, they're playing to these weirdos. I didn't understand like, that they were like in a mental hospital. I just thought they were like weird punks or whatever. And my child perception of it just seemed like, oh, everyone looks like so rad and bizarre. Like, this is fucking cool. Not knowing that they were probably like on a ton of medication and not doing so well.
Right. And Dylan, I don't know if you saw, I watched a little bit of this. Mm-hmm. I mean, there is no barrier whatsoever from them and the people. Like there are people like fully coming up on stage, stealing the microphone and just screaming into it. Like, I'm surprised like no one was harmed in the making of this.
It's like a lawless hardcore show.
It completely is. But if you think about it, like, I mean, I don't think punk was like widely understood yet, like it wasn't like 80s punk where there's like, oh, it's dangerous. So I think they were just like, oh, this band wants to come and play to the people that are living at this hospital. I don't know what the logic behind it was, but it was a huge, obviously a huge success in the sense of like a sort of PR move, if you want to look at it like that. Which is also weird, and not to make it about me, but like even like when Holy Molar went and did our only tour, we played this kid's birthday party, and it was like kind of fucked up and like not as cool as the Cramps, but like the whole idea was like, hey, we should probably do this stupid thing because it might become something, substantially noteworthy, I guess. So like, I think that like watching that early Cramps thing definitely put a little seed in my brain to do stupid shit for my life. Yeah.
It's kind of funny getting, back into the history of this band a little bit as well. I wouldn't have expected that it kind of all begins in like Akron, Ohio. Like Lux Interior is just from Akron, and you wouldn't think that there would be avenues to like discover kind of weirder, like obscure shit. But like this guy was, you know, heavily into like late night TV horror stuff, which is very, you know, clearly finding its way into the music that they're writing. And kind of like yourself, going to shows at a very young age, like they lived away, like maybe walking distance away from college near them. And he talked about being a kid and sneaking into shows at this place called the Doghouse. And that was kind of like what inspired him to, you know, follow this trajectory. I think his older brother as well was like, you know, pompadour, kind of leather jacket, kind of wearing person. You know, come to find you yourself, you know, in your early teens, you know, making trips down to like Tijuana to see some fucking wild shows. Like that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, the TJ stuff was pretty crazy too, but I had like it didn't seem that weird to me because I had already been going to like to punk shows. I remember when I first moved to San Diego, I was like, hey, I want to go see this band called Meat Wagon. And I was like, I told my mom would like drop me off. I was like 13, I think. And it's funny because I actually live right by where the show was. And back then it was like not the best of neighborhoods. And I remember the opening band played, I don't know who they were. And then there was like this skinhead fight and a guy got stabbed. It was like a skinhead battle between like racist and non-racist ones. And a dude got stabbed. And so we all got like thrown out of the venue. And then I had this is like obviously before cell phones. So I had to wait for my mom to drive all the way back home. And then I had to call her and be like, hey, I need you to turn around and come back and get me, not telling her like, oh, some dude got stabbed to death, you know? So that was interesting. Like and you know, people were like, it was crazy. Like being a 13-year-old kid sitting outside of this place. I had someone try to sell me drugs, someone asking if I wanted beer. The skinheads wanted my camera that I had. I had like a disposable camera, and they're like, we want your photos. I had to give the camera away over to the like sharp skinheads. And it was just like, God damn, man, like this fucking shit is crazy. So I don't know, I just went off on a tangent, but but you know what I was gonna say is like with the Cramps being from Ohio, I mean, so is Devo, and they both seem like in the very similar realm of obscurity and like just on the like kind of like the more artistic fringes of what punk was or whatever, you know, like into like a vibe and a look more than just like a band like maybe Minor Threat or something that was more like straightforward, pun intended. But yeah, so you know, that's my take on it, I guess.
The next thing that was kind of fascinating because, you know, Lux Interior being from Akron, he essentially tries to avoid the draft by going to college. Like he attended California State University in Sacramento. And so this is where he actually meets Poison Ivy, because she's also going there at the time. I think she is from the area. She's from California, and they just are like instantly hit it off. They're into the same shit. And they're inseparable. Like they've been inseparable up until, you know, Lux's death. And, you know, again, kind of doing my research on you, it seems like every project you've kind of had like collaborators in your life that have persisted throughout. Like, you know, you've been in bands with multiple different people. Like there seems to be like a core group of people. Once you find someone that you really connect with, you kind of hang on to that person. And, you know, can you speak to that? Like how is important to find like those people in your life? Like, you know, I would consider Dylan like very crucial to me, like getting into music and doing this thing, whatever we're doing. But you seem to have like a core group of people that are very close to you and kind of put you in a place to be creative and have that output.
Well, yeah. So the story with Lux and Ivy is interesting because I heard that he picked her up hitchhiking randomly, yes. Which I feel like maybe there's a little bit of embellishment there. I mean, I'll give them credit. I think they're so fascinating regardless, but I'm always kind of like, maybe that really wasn't how it actually happened. Yeah. But whatever. But for me, it is interesting because there's a lot of overlap with like musicians that I would work with. And obviously I think it's interesting because a lot of people are like, even if we don't all play together, we're all friends. So like, and also like maybe the like all of my guitar friends that I play with all really respect each other, and all my drummer friends always really respect each other. So there's that kind of like, I wouldn't want to say like incestuousness, but there is like a little link to everybody. and again, like they all do their own things too that I'm not part of, but I really feel like we all have a common ground, and that's really something I appreciate. And obviously over the years, Gabe Serbian was kind of like the main person that was like a huge impact on my life and so many different things that I've done. And I think if we could have, we probably would have done a lot more together. But there's, yeah, like there's certain people that I work really well with or that tolerate me or whatever, or vice versa. And that is cool because then we get to not like challenge each other like in an aggressive way, but like I really do like when someone does something that's like when I went and saw the Cramps, I had to fucking study what they were doing, and I want to like hear like Luke Henshaw from Planet B is a good example. He'll make these tracks, and I have to just like really figure out like not only what is going on, but like what he expects me to do, because he's seeing it in a certain way that maybe I don't, especially for him, because he comes from like a more hip hop realm, but it happens with everybody. Like when, even in Dead Cross, like when, playing with Dave Lombardo was so interesting because Mike Crane and I, who were in Retox together, we were like, Dave, have you heard, Warsaw Was Raw? And he's just like, no. And we're like, oh, you got to hear this. And, then he playing something like that to someone that's looked at as like this huge legend that's like get their mind blown by something that we were just like, oh, they're our friends. Warsaw Was Raw, yeah, of course. And he's just like, what the fuck is this, and so there's like cool things to kind of bring, I guess, everybody or more people into the fold, and not that our fold, not that it's about like our fold, because like if anything we were brought into, let's say, Dave's fold or whoever's fold, but vice versa. So that it was just kind of like, hey, look where we're from, and like check this shit out. And so who knows, maybe that influenced whatever trajectory he's on, and so on and so forth. So like there are a lot of players that I will work with that maybe aren't so affluent with the stuff that we all are into. So like I mean, I don't want to like throw anybody under the bus, but like another example would be Lucian Greaves from Satanic Temple. Like he knew about like maybe me with the Locust or Dead Cross, but like didn't know much beyond that as far as like what we're into. And like the stuff he was into was more like industrial music or whatever. So it is kind of cool to be like, hey, check all this other shit out. Like here's a deep dive into like where I come from or where we came from. And so it's cool, I think, to like be able to revisit things. And also it helps me or my comrades like also realize like, oh, hey, we are influenced by these things. This is, and places a little bit more importance or value on bands that maybe we're just like, oh, whatever. Like a good example is Warsaw Was Raw. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, or if anyone listened to that. They're a two-piece, and their record that's called Sensitizer. It's just a red cover. It's so fucking insane. And like, I mean, I get it. The validity of that record is very important and intense. But like, I'm kind of just like, oh, it's a great record. But like, for someone that doesn't know, it's a fucking insanely great record. So that's like kind of revisit it and be like, oh, check out how so-and-so reacted to this thing that I thought was just awesome. Like, it's actually very awesome. And I think that's a cool way to look at maybe things in our past that we used as not necessarily influence, but like maybe just a reference point or something.
That's sick. I think that's kind of a big kind of point to my next kind of questions and kind of topic here with like turning each other on to like new stuff, finding very obscure shit. These guys were just huge, insane record collectors, and Dylan and Justin, I see that, your collection. What's the furthest you would ever travel to get a record, you think?
Well, that's a weird question, because like you can just order it online.
This is true. Yes. Maybe in the past, maybe like pre-internet, was there like a record that you just had to have, or maybe like something that was obscure or rare that like you went to great lengths to get?
Well, that is a great question, but maybe might not be that applicable to me, because for me it was I was always on tours. So I do remember going to Japan, and like shit was like unhinged over there. I was like freaking out because you really were able to find a lot of stuff. Like record stores there were so much, I don't want to say cooler, but they were way fucking cooler than other places. And you could really find insane shit. And also like it was weird. Like this is kind of a trip. Like I fucking hate that band Screwdriver, but you could go there and like there was like Nazi shit like Screwdriver records, and you're like, whoa, they're just selling them right there because like it wasn't an issue or like what I mean, maybe they don't do it anymore, but like this is like 20 years ago when I would go on tour there. But so if you're gonna have fucked up records like that, you're probably gonna have like other like
Yeah.
maybe not like fucked up racist records, but like fucked up records. So like we would find some kind of gnarly shit that was just obscure and rare and yeah. So I mean, I guess Japan, because I do remember like going to Japan and kind of being like, fuck, I don't have the money for this. And also, how are we gonna get this shit home? So those were like always a huge issue. But again, like the traveling thing's crazy because I remember being in Europe for the first time I ever went when I was 20, and someone had a Infest the first LP, like a test pressing, and I bought that. And that's pretty wild to have a test pressing of that. I ended up spilling Nutella all over it. But anyhow, but like that's a pretty like hard thing to find, and it was great to be able to have that ability. So yeah, touring would definitely, because you have a couple hours to kill. You're gonna go look for something to eat and like some records. I still do that even though you can kind of get a lot of it online. But yeah, so the distance is definitely there for sure.
Dylan, what's the craziest thing you have in your collection? You'd probably think.
Ooh, man, that's a wild one. I can distinctly remember I played some out of state shows with kind of like a traditional rock and roll band. And we went to Cincinnati, which isn't a terrible drive from where I live, but they have a great record store there called Shake It Records. And the basement of this is all just underground extreme music, everything in there. So it was like a kid in a candy store for me. And I remember, I believe I bought, there's a grind band called Social Infestation from Atlanta. And they just happened to have the 10-inch there. And I went, yep, I can't leave without this. Like, it's got to happen. So what's that, like 4 hours from here? So at that point for us, so that'd be like one of the more wild things I have. But everything else I've been able just to kind of, luckily I can just look at my phone and go, oh, okay, I need that now. It's got to happen.
I mean, so all this to say that, Lux and Ivy were like very into finding just, budget bin kind of like 45s, very influenced by, the Blues of the South and a lot of Sun Records artists. So again, pre-internet, I don't know how you would find out that basically the Sun Records warehouse is giving away or they're selling a lot of their inventory in this warehouse for like 20 cents a record. So they all load into a car, drive like 30 hours to Memphis to just load up. I think their car broke down like 30 hours into the trip. They had to wire money from a family, get the car fixed, spent the rest of the money on records, which they loaded up and could there was just so much weight, and this could be exaggerated, but it just probably barely made it back just getting all of these, Sun Records artists, which, finding a lot of this influence and covers like directly from those artists, like on this record alone, right? One of the biggest inspirations that I found Lux had vocally was like a rockabilly artist by the name of Charlie Feathers, which I believe they cover on this record. I can't hardly stand it, which I thought going into this band, I always thought that was just their song because they just do it so well. Like they just make these covers their own, like they're so unique to their sound and what they're bringing. But when you compare the vocal stylings of Lux and Charlie Feathers, it's that weird kind of like almost tremolo kind of cutting thing that
Vibrato.
he does. Yeah. It's so wild.
It's crazy seeing some of those photos of their house and stuff too, where they would have like records everywhere. It's really impressive. I know Poison Ivy lives in Los Angeles, and I have friends that kind of know her a little bit, but I want to I want to meet her now so bad, but it'd be so sick to have her play on a record or play on a song or something. But yeah, I think that ship's probably passed. I don't think she's gonna ever do anything again. But it's just it would be so incredible if she played music with somebody or just to meet her and this now, I guess, I trip out like meeting her at the age of 12 and then again like around the age of 25 or 26. I just wish I knew a little bit more about life when I met her and kind of just explained without being annoying, how important that band was, you know. Because sometimes people will say that like about the Locust or something, and I appreciate it a lot. And or Swing Kids, someone will say like, "Oh, that band saved my life," and it's really really nice to hear that. But yeah. Also, I know how it is to be like to have like a Punisher, you know, kind of like talk my ears off. But I don't. Yeah, I wouldn't want to do that. But anyhow, I'd love to meet her in person if possible again. Yeah.
Yeah, and even just like peruse that fucking collection, probably stuff that I've never heard of before. I'm sure.
Yeah. But back in the day, you used to kind of, I don't know how this happened, but like when there was Tower Records, you could go there and there was an import section, and you could, I don't know how I would do this, but there would be all these like weird, I don't even know if it was like what, maybe it was like called rockabilly or psychobilly, or maybe it's called psychobilly, because I think the psychobilly stuff was like a little bit more fucked up. And there was like a section, and I could kind of look through it and be like, oh wait, that's the same title as the Cramp song. And then I would buy these other records, realizing that those were the originals, and also just as jacked up. But maybe like a little bit more lo-fi or something. And I ended up discovering a bunch of really obscure bands that way. So like, yeah, they were tapping into something very, very cool and unique, and making it their own, which is what all artists should really do if they're gonna
Yeah.
if they're gonna create something.
Which maybe that's even kind of like I always wondered about. You know, we kind of maybe touched on this a little bit in our cattle decapitation deep dive. You know, kind of looking at San Diego, and it feels to me maybe on paper that it would be very hard to kind of like, it's not the same as like an LA or maybe like a Bay Area. And it seems like it would be very hard to have like an arts culture. But because of that, maybe you don't have, like, it seemed like you guys didn't really have like a lot of the same rules as everybody else. So now you're able to kind of do your own, kind of like the Cramps, your own unique thing. There's no preconceived notion of like, it has to be this or that. You just fucking do it. And now everybody kind of knows it as like this unique hub and a sound.
I think that's a good perception, and I do think it's very accurate. And I feel weird saying it sometimes because I feel like I'm I don't know, like boosting up San Diego more than I should or something. But like I really think like even when I first started going to shows here, I would go to a show and it would be a mixed bag of stuff. There would never be 4 or 5 bands that were all like the same genre or even like the same not even like genre, but like ethnicity or like age bracket. Like it was just all over the place. You just go there and you would see a bunch of random shit, and it was always kind of cool, and people could take away from it whatever they wanted. And you know, off the top of my head, and like examples that I always use are like going to the Che to see Heroin play, and there'll be like a 4-piece jazz band, and then it's like all you can eat spaghetti. And so that I obviously would want to go see Heroin and get spaghetti, and then I'm like, whoa, this jazz band's fucking sick. I didn't realize I like jazz or whatever, you know? And so those are like the kind of things that really, I think are inherently beneficial to you kind of getting outside of the box. Cause, and again, I always reference this too, like people would always, you know, ask like, what kind of like blah, blah, blah bands do you listen to? And like Gabe would always say like, oh, I don't listen to hardcore. I just play it. And I was like, oh shit, that's pretty rad, you know? And I think that's when you don't have, you know, the lanes and you just have like this idea, you can kind of go out of the lanes and do whatever the fuck you want. And I think that says a lot. I mean, even like with cattle decapitation, if you think about the starting point and where they're at now, even if you look at it as like 2 different bands, which in a sense it might be, but like earlier idea to set out like to kind of be like Carcass mixed with maybe Discordance Axis or something. And then now it's, I don't even know how to explain it now. Like there's like all this operatic stuff and like the musicianship and is flawless amongst everybody in that band. It's just, I think that maybe based on like what we all grew up with, we were able to kind of not have this a lane, and everyone wants a lane for some reason, you know, like you know, when your band sounds like the band before it and then you're just like, I mean, it's cool or whatever. I don't know. I mean, even like the Locust, when we started, the whole idea was to sound like Crossed Out. And I think we completely missed that mark from the start. And like, I mean, I wish we did sound like that. It would have been great if we sounded like that. But I'm also grateful that we missed that mark and ended up doing something else and didn't have that that lane to follow, because if anything, we were referencing bands like the Cramps and Devo, like we were just like, oh yeah, let's be in the realm of what Crossed Out would do, but like this shit too, but even going back to Crossed Out, that's another San Diego band, because if you listen to that, like, dude, they have like this like brutal blast beat parts, and then they'll have like a surf riff, and you're like, what? But like with kind of like a D beat on it, but like it is a fucking surf riff, and you're like, dude, that's sick. Let's do that or whatever. So yeah, the reference point thing is really important. I feel like in San Diego, because again, like I would grow up and see hip hop acts or like funk acts or whatever, or even like now like cumbias or like just different kinds of music style. And like the last Locust tour that we did, we took Sonido de la Frontera on tour with us, which is a cumbia band, and it's like so sick. And going outside of California or outside of San Diego and playing shows and having people be like, whoa, this cumbia is, I guess they're there to see the Locust, but then they're like trying to dance to this other music. It's really rad, and also like inspiring to see that. So
I like that you mentioned that kind of these like diverse kind of lineups on shows and bills and tours. This band definitely did a little bit of that. I'm going to gloss over a few things here. So they moved from Sacramento back to Akron. This is kind of where they get the name the Cramps, but then they also discover that there's a scene in New York. So they moved to New York City and become kind of like ingrained in some of the punk music that's going on there. Become like kind of the house band of Max's Kansas City. I think they're able to get in CBGBs a little later, but where they really started to kind of pick up buzz is getting on some of these bigger tours outside of their home territory. So, they played, like you mentioned, that the mental hospital in California. I believe it was basically like a run of dates they did in California, one of which they opened for The Clash and Bo Diddley, who was major influence on them. And so that's kind of like how they get buzz. But, you yourself, being in some of the bands that you have, like I always thought it was kind of fascinating where, here you have like a band like The Locust and you're opening for like Andrew WK or like the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. And it's like, I'm sure, the Cramps opening for The Clash and, Bo Diddley, like, getting fucking heckled and but being completely uniquely themselves and just kind of powering through it. And it certainly like paid off, but I don't know. I just always found that kind of correlation, like the diverse kind of tour packagings that they were a part of. So they kind of get all this buzz in California, and this is what gets them the attention of IRS Records, which was founded by Miles Copeland, who maybe some people listening to the show might know as the brother of Stuart Copeland, who is the drummer of The Police, which is a band that he managed and helped produce like records for. Their father, I believe, helped found the CIA. So there's a lot of weird conspiracy shit going on there that maybe the CIA had a hand in pushing like counterculture and punk music. I don't, that was a weird rabbit hole that I found myself in when doing research for this. But yeah, so just a wild kind of train of events. And so now we, fast forward to this record, basically IRS and the band kind of had it out for one another, and they initiated in a lawsuit. And so this lawsuit kind of started because, the Cramps, according to them, they hadn't been given the money that they were owed initially. There was, some questions of validity on some of the royalty statements that they have. So they sued the label, and it kept them from releasing new music for 2 years. So IRS, knowing that they probably were the real working relationship with this band was done, they were like, all right, well, we just need to make any money we can on them before this is like settled. So thus you have Bad Music for Bad People. They were just kind of like, we got to put this out and make some money on it. And while that's, certainly sleazy, it sounds like this record and maybe another singles collection were very pivotal for a lot of people getting in, like yourself, like getting into the Cramps. Cause it's just like, all of these songs like are great. They're fantastic. Yeah.
Well, well, going back to the part where you said they're opening for Bo Diddley and The Clash was interesting, because I'm assuming when The Clash was on tour with them, they were kind of like comfortable, and I feel like the Cramps were like hungry,
Yeah.
So they were like, I wouldn't want to I wouldn't want to have that band opening for me if I was in the Clash. Like they're gonna fucking smoke your asses, you know, and that's like that's a big problem. And so but there's like footage of, or maybe not, there's photos of them playing the Boat Italy show that I've seen, or like on the tour with them, or I think it was Boat Italy. Either way, like, but people were throwing trash and shit at them and stuff, and I was like, oh, that's so. Uh, as a kid, I thought it was so interesting, and then I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And then actually, when it happened to me, I was like, "This kind of sucks."
Yeah.
But I do realize that like the best point of that is when you can play a show and have people react positively or negatively. If they're indifferent, then you kind of fucked up, because like who wants to go see a band play at the state fair and you're just like, I don't give a shit. But if there's an opener that's fucking driving you nuts and you want to destroy them, like then you're probably successful on some level. So I've definitely related to that in many ways. But the label thing is weird too, because I do think it's interesting how like at that time punk was kind of becoming like they had the video for Garbage Man. So at some point they were kind of trying to put the labels trying to push it. But it was interesting because what was my point was that I think that like the label, and I'm looking at it from like maybe a major label aspect, which I've never really dealt with, but like they were like, oh, this new commodity, we're gonna sell the shit out of this. And then things kind of backfired. So they were just like, fuck it. But I wonder if, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure the Cramps left them for many reasons. There was probably a lot of issues, but like you would think that they didn't share the sort of same aesthetics or the moral values or whatever. And that was like what caused the departure. But to me, I would look at IRS Records and think like, oh, this looks cool. Like as a kid, it seemed like a cool label, because they also put out some other like adjacently strange-ish albums. So I was like, oh, this is sick. Like cool label. Didn't really know the inner workings of like what labels are about. But also, not to like derail this conversation, but like seeing IRS on the Cramps labels also was a very informative thing, or on the Cramps record covers was very informative in the sense that like I also got to the Misfits at the same time, and I would see Caroline and Plan 9, and so like, you know, Caroline, I think, was it became more so a distributor, but like it was really interesting to see that. And that kind of translated to like alternative tentacles for sure. And then maybe like Discord a little bit later. And so those kind of things really, I started paying attention to labels, which was cool. It was like a book club for vinyl or something. Anyhow, yeah.
That's super. I mean, getting into your label at a young, at like 31G, or like, huge fan of like the label Tank Crimes, like, and then like, oh, I like this band. What's the other shit sound like? I have to check it out. So absolutely, I feel that 100%.
Yeah.
Getting into some of the tracks here. I mean, the opening song is like quintessential Garbage Man. Like, and obviously you Retox covered it for the compilation. You and William Shatner, you know, both of y'all just, you did a great job. I found that I listened to it last night, and I'm like, that's buck wild that Captain Kirk and Retox have both covered this song.
Yeah, I feel like maybe he shouldn't have done that, but
yeah, maybe.
yeah. It's funny, like the comp is interesting, and we did a Queen one and a Birthday Party one too, but it's interesting like to find a band that you think is worthy of that, and also like not like there's some things you're like, you just don't go there, you know? And so I think with all three of those bands, but specifically with the Cramps one, because it's like the most recent, was like, do we do this? Like, is this like, what's the word? Like where it's like it's like blasphemy or something, you know, like, you know, and so I always wonder, like, what would Lux think of this? Or, you know, now, like I'm assuming Ivy got caught wind of it and maybe has heard it, but I wonder like, or, you know, like Kid Congo Powers. I mean, he's kind of in the realm, but because, and it's not like a weird thing to think about, because I have a photo of Brian May from Queen holding the Queen tribute that I put out.
Whoa, that's
and
awesome.
The fact that he didn't sue us is insane, because there's fucking bastard noise on there, you know, and like he didn't sue us. So, but yeah, and again, like I really wanted to take part in it, and I am not exactly sure that we did Garbage Man justice. Retox, it was the last thing we recorded, and I think it was just kind of like, I think we shit the bed, but I don't know. I like the record a lot. I think this the on the I mean, obviously the original is amazing. You can't fuck with that. It's one of the best records of all time. But the cover of that band's material is like very, very hard to do. The standouts on both the original and the tribute record are probably TV or well, like I guess Human Fly for sure. I mean, you can't fuck with that. And then TV Set are were like always my favorites as a kid. And then the two artists that covered those songs on the tribute nailed it. And I think that's really important to have the those hits, be well translated, and then you can kind of have all like the weirdo B-sides. But it was funny diving into the tribute record was because I was like, hey, you guys, you're picking songs that are not originals, they're covers. So you're covering a cover. Like that's not going to work. I had to like send some of the bands like a list of like their actual originals. I'm like, these are the ones you can pick from. You can't pick these other ones. So that did happen too.
Dylan, how about your favorite song on this comp?
Honestly, it's just for the fact that I thought he was eating a sandwich the entire time he was recording the vocal track, which was She Said. The minute I heard that, I went, come on. I was like, he's obviously just like hamming down on a hoagie like during this vocal track. And then you had to tell me the background information on that, which he just shoved a styrofoam cup in his mouth, which I thought was just perfect. I went, okay, I'm sold.
It's such a brilliant idea too. That is crazy too, because as a kid, I was trying to figure out if it was even him, and then also like how he did it. And this is, before the internet, I'm just like, this is fucking bizarre. Like, and it's weird too, because that's a great song actually to use as a reference, because why would a child like that? Well, because it sounds like a fucking jacked up like Adult Swim cartoon. Like of course like a kid should like this shit, So that was that's a good again, going back to like Human Fly and stuff too, like, oh, it's like the bug sounding thing. This is great. But that's crazy. The fucking styrofoam cup. Oh man.
I love this record just for it really does just feel a lot like off the cuff, just kind of improv as far as like effects and just the way that the distorted guitars are kind of layered in there. Cause there are like traditional kind of, song structures, but a lot of the shit just feels like very experimental, and they are just playing around with like maybe what little resources or money that they have to like create some of these. I mean, Garbage Man alone, very wild. And TV Set, I think definitely stands out as my favorite. Not only just for like the soundscape stuff, but just kind of learning more about the two of them and their history with like some of that late night TV shit. Like, I'm from the Chicagoland area, so like Svengoolie was like always a big part of my life, and just to learn that like found its way into this music is very cool. And then the fact that they even got into kind of movies a little bit, Return to the Living Dead, they get a song in there. I always loved you guys kind of almost had a shared John Waters connection. I find out I think they were supposed to have music in Crybaby, but the maybe like whoever was distributing the movie said no, and John Waters like had no idea that they like nixed some of the songs from that.
Yeah, and that movie is incredible too. It could have definitely used the Cramps in it for sure. For me, I was obsessed with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So when part 2 came out, I was like, oh, the Cramps, Goo Goo Muck. That was so sick that they were in there. And it also, man, I think it might have been, I don't know what year that movie came out, but I was probably like 10 or 11. That was insane too, because I was already into the Cramps, and I remember like this might be like a tangent to go off on, and I'm sorry, but okay. There was this video store down the street that I became friends with, so I always go in there and rent videos. And my mom and the owner became friends somehow, and so it was like my birthday, and they had at the store these 3 cardboard cutouts. And one was Leatherface, one was Freddy Krueger, one was Jason Voorhees. And they're like, for your birthday, pick one. I was like, I'm picking Leatherface. This is sick. And I remember at the time when the movie came out, it was rated X because it was so violent or gory or whatever. And so I was like, not supposed to be able to rent it, but obviously he's like, just rent. Yeah, I was like psyched. Part 1 was like one of my favorite movies. Part 2, I get home, my mom has some of my friends over, and she made us chili, which is funny because in the movie they're eating chili made of human meat. And so we had this we had this party with like three of my friends. But anyhow, we had chili. We're watching the movie. There's the statue or the cardboard cutout of Leatherface, and then on comes the Cramps, and I'm like, this is that cassette that I stole at the mall the other day. Like, wow, this band is so sick, and they're in the movie, and then it really made everything like fully come together, you know. And I like that song a lot, but it's not one of my favorites. But I was just so psyched that like it was in that movie because that movie's incredible too. And that movie kind of like sums up like the Cramps in a sense too, because there's a lot of humor in it. And I think that the Cramps obviously have that element. So
I'm surprised that, and maybe I didn't do enough research, but like, you know, being that there is a lot of like, you know, tongue in cheek kind of humor. There's a lot of like, you know, references to like these exploitation films. I'm surprised that they didn't end up in a trauma film as well. And, you know, you are obviously, this will come out after, but you're going to be on a panel this weekend for like the trauma at like, San Diego Comic-Con with like the 50th anniversary thing. That's so sick.
yeah, well, that's so the Locust was in Toxic Avenger Part 4, and they ended up cutting our scene out actually because of Gene Simmons, which is kind of weird. Crazy story, because yeah, whatever. I'm friends with Lloyd. So he is actually coming to San Diego for the Comic-Con, and he's going to be on the Cult and Culture podcast this Saturday as well.
Sick.
So yeah, so we're going to do that.
Yeah, I was so bummed. Like, are you in like at all? Like, I tried to look through it a little bit, like in Toxie 4, where they have that party at the Playboy Mansion. I'm like, where are you guys? Like, maybe if you guys are in like at the very just fucking smutty kind of pool party that's going on.
Yeah, there's like there's a scene where you can see, I think it's like me and Bobby or me and Joey, and we're like running around in this. I don't know, like there was a zoo at the Playboy Mansion, so there was like we were running around this area that was like the zoo area, and then there's another part where you can see Gabe and I in the grotto, and the evil Noxie, whatever, he comes in to like kill someone, and I remember we were like, we're in the grotto like partying is what we're supposed to be doing, yeah, and so it's just a second, but we tried to perform musically, and it was so jacked up and shitty because they didn't have the right noise permits, and Gene Simmons called the police on them or on us or whatever, so we weren't able to do it. Which is, I mean, I'm glad it got cut, but it would have been cool to be in the film as well, and I'm sure we'll dive into it. I really want to ask Lloyd more about it. I've not had a time to like really sit down and like talk to him since we recorded that or filmed that like years and years ago. The only time I've ever seen him was really at the Comic-Con, and there's just people everywhere, and it's not like I can really get like some one-on-one time. So I really want to figure out what all exactly happened, because it was one of the most insane things I've ever done. But going back, it like felt like something the Cramps would have done. You know, it's like,
100%.
you know, like go to the Playboy Mansion and play with like flamingos and monkeys and drunk people, and then fucking Toxic Avenger. You know,
it's funny. It just made me think of it. Some of the things that like people do just to kind of fund their art. You know, when they moved to New York City, I know that Lux worked at a record store that they would ultimately write and practice at. Ivy worked as a waitress for a very short, brief amount of time, but then she actually started working as a dominatrix, like for quite a while. Like, and so maybe some of the performance and some of like the style of clothes would come from that. So I just found that interesting that like, oh man, like here's a direct route to this wild other like subculture.
Yeah, because if you see like some of the earlier stuff of the Cramps, she's always wearing like kind of like business casual outfits or something, you know, like, and she looks great, and you know, but they all kind of like had that vibe, like all black and like button up shirts or whatever. But it wasn't until like I mean, because even on that video of Garbage Man, she like looks pretty rad. Yeah, but later on, like you know, can your pussy do the dog or smell a female, where it kind of got like a little bit more burlesque ish or something. So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
One other, I mean, there's like definitely other correlations that I could make as far as like, both of you guys have been featured in cartoons. Like I think they were in an episode of SpongeBob, you being in like Uncle Grandpa, and of course, maybe the main takeaway is just kind of like their DIY spirit that existed from like the beginning to the end. I mean, they started their own label, Vengeance Records, just to put out your own thing. And, I mean, damn, you've been like, what? It's been like 30 years now, correct? With 31G?
Yeah, it's 29. So yeah, but who's counting? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. There was a we were used to be distributed by this company called Mortem Records, and they also distributed Vengeance Records. So there was this convention we had to go to in Sacramento, and there was when they're yeah, I guess like they had left Epitaph or haven't signed to Epitaph yet or something. So they were like doing their own label stuff. And we went to the convention, and I had talked to them a little bit there, and I was like, hey, I met you when I was 12. I'm in a band called the Locust. Like you know, you guys heavily influenced me. I would say you've probably influenced a decent amount of the band in general. And then it was really cool. We like, you know, got to hang out and stuff. But then at the convention, there was like this big circle with all the different label people. And I remember like I don't remember what the topic of it was, but we were all in this big circle to talk about each of our labels and the music industry and distribution and stuff. And it was funny because at the time I was running a label with my friend Alicia Edwards, and so we were sitting on one side, and almost directly across from us was Lux and Ivy, and I had just flown in from a tour in Europe, and I was really jet lagged, and I kept falling asleep, and Lux was across the way, and I think he was on heroin and kept falling asleep, and everybody kind of looked at like, oh, the two guys like in the rock bands are fucking passed out like fucking drug addicts, and I was like, you guys, I'm really just fucking tired, but if you're gonna like equate me to Lux, and you know, I'll take it. And it was kind of like a flattering thing, but yeah, a couple people made a few comments like, "Oh yeah, like you and Lux passing out at the fucking convention." I'm like, I tried to stay awake. I was just so fucking tired. So, yeah. Anyhow,
That's awesome. Well, I mean, just to kind of round out this conversation on this band, I mean, I have to thank you because it was fascinating to dive into this story and this record alone, just kind of, you know, experiencing a lot of it for the first time through this compilation. And maybe if there are, maybe if there's a summary, like why should people check this out? Why do you feel like this band is so important and integral to punk music or just, you know, American music in general? Like what is it about the Cramps that people should know and why should they check them out?
that's a pretty loaded question because I think like if you think about like a punk, I'll use air quotes, and how it's kind of evolved into something that's not quite as edgy or something. Because I remember when I was a little kid, and like never mind the Bullocks, it was like the most insane record. They said "fuck" on it, you know, and it was like just gnarly and like now you're just like whatever. But like I think objectively speaking, I think with the Cramps, it is there that or specifically that record, but all their catalog, the band in general is able to encapsulate quite a lot of different things. So it has like elements of rock and pop, and it's very catchy, and it has hooks, but it also is very interesting and uses like again like horror references or like sci-fi references, and all those things kind of bring in another element where like you have say a more modern band. I'm terrible at like thinking of something off the top of my head, but like let's just for the sake of like how I think maybe U2 sucks. Like, you know, U2 doesn't have a vibe. You're just like, ugh, like it's just a thing. When you think of the Cramps, you think of like everything that they encompass. Like it is like the thing. So that's kind of like how I would see them. But also going back to for me as a 12-year-old seeing them play and going like, there's these two women in the band. This is fucking cool as hell. There's a singer that's like in high heels and like sticking the mic in his pants. Like I feel like they were kind of like using androgyny and redefining like gender roles and gender norms. And I think that was like something that is way ahead of the time. And on that trajectory, probably influenced a lot of bands like the ones I've been in, or even like I think the Yeah Yeah Yeahs covered Human Fly or something, or they covered so like bands like that where you're like I can kind of see that too, you know, like fucking Nick Zinner has a total Poison Ivy vibe, you know, when he plays guitar. So and Karen has a Lux vibe, you know, so it's like I think it like those kind of bands, a band like the Cramps has influenced those kind of bands, you know, be it the Locust or Yeah Yeahs or whoever, and it's one of those things, one of the main stepping stones or launching points that maybe a younger generation from the Cramps themselves got to use to create art. And with that being said, fucking thanks, man, because like that's crazy shit to like be able to be like, because when I saw them, they were just so welcoming to me. They treated me like a regular human being. They gave me more respect than my parents did, you know. It's just like, this is fucking cool. I was nobody, and it really helped me become something. That one moment in time, which probably didn't mean shit for them, you know. They were just like, yeah, whatever, that kid's cool, like not a big deal. But to me, it was the biggest deal ever. So yeah.
I think that sums it up perfectly. Do we want to do recommendations really quick and then get you on the road?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the stuff I've been like, okay, so mainly I listen to NPR, so I'll just say that. But as far as music, it's like a lot of the time I spend listening to music is either things that I'm putting out on 31G, which are my friends' bands, or me working on stuff with my own bands. I'm not going to hype my own shit, but like for 31G, like, I mean, we're working with this band Help now from Portland, who are just amazing. And we're working on a second record with Stress Positions.
Oh,
that band, yeah, dude.
that's one of my recommendations,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah, yeah. That's a crazy band too, because usually I don't. So like they reached out to 31G and I didn't know of them or them, and I was like, God damn, this is really really good. And I did a deep dive and I watched all these videos, kind of trying to see if it was not like up to par for me, but like I need to like if because I don't make money running 31G. So I'm like, if I'm gonna fuck myself on another band on 31G, I need to really love them, you know. And so and I mean that like in a joking way, because I don't really fuck myself, but anyhow, I was like, I need to know they're going to be like the best thing ever. And so we did the record, or I don't know if it came out yet, but like, anyhow, we agreed on it. The record's going to be on 31G. And then I went and saw them and met them, and they are the most incredible live band. They have no weak links whatsoever. They were the best people. And I was like, this is the fucking shit. It's like total 31G style right there. Like everything about them was just perfect. So yeah, that band is the best.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of jump in and recommend Harsh Reality was fucking killer when it came out. I loved it. This is a band that's, you know, somewhat local to me. I was a big fan of some of the members of this band's previous band, Shoe. So when this came out, I had to check it out. I fucking love it. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely do it.
Yes. Yeah, there's more. Fuck Money. That band's sick too. We did that split with them, but their EP is so killer. What a crazy, weird, unique band. Also, too, like Fuck Money is a good example of like, you know, they're from Texas, and like I don't know how that shit came out of there. Like it's Austin or whatever. Austin's Austin, but like it is such a unique band and their sound and everything about it. The people involved, like it's just like, where did this come from? Fucking outer space, you know. So yeah.
Hell yeah. Dylan, what have you been listening to, man? What have you been checking out?
I've been digging into the most recent Nile releases, the new singles that they've dropped. You know, I kind of lost track of this band in like 2007. Everything after that just didn't quite hit the same way. And this newest release definitely seems a little bit in vein of their older releases, particularly that Ithy Phallic record from 2007. So the new album is called The Underworld Awaits Us All, and they've released 2 tracks from this. I am not even going to read the title of the first one because it's, you know, if it's a long title track from that band, it's typically going to be a pretty good one. But the most recent single, To Strike with Secret Fang, it sounds like Nile. You can't really change that band up too much. You know, if you're into any of the other death metal bands, Immolation, Suffocation, a lot of the technical bands like that, you're going to enjoy this. But I'm really looking forward to this. It comes out on Napalm Records in October, I believe.
Nice. I'm gonna add a couple more. Planet B, Fiction Prediction is out now. Check out the split with Nate No Face. Check out the Hers Collective collaboration and Fuck Money split. Def Club's got a European tour coming up, correct?
Yeah, November. So it's a little bit out. Yeah. We just did another one too. But yeah, and then I'm going to record a new album today. So yeah, we're that's happening as well.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Very cool. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you got a pretty schedule. It was so nice to just like get to know you more and pick your brain about the Cramps, man. This was so cool.
Thanks. I really appreciate it. It was cool to make it have it be like a personal tie to me, because they're such a huge band in my life. So yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you so much. If you want to give us a follow, stay up to date on anything with Riff Worship at Riff Worship Pod, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We got some playlists in the description below. We'll be back next week with something else. But for Justin, myself, and Dylan, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks so much.